Hi, everybody. How are you all? Hope all are doing well. And I'm very happy to welcome you all to our second session in the series Literature for Life, that is Introduction to Literature, Part 2. So let's begin. Just a minute. And here we are with our module. And before we begin our module 2, let us just revise or recap what we have studied in Introduction to Literature, Part 1. You will remember that we tried to trace the origins of the word literature from the Latin word literatura or litera, meaning whatever is written. And then we tried to define literature as an academic discipline. We saw various definitions of this very interesting and complex term, and we spoke of literature as a reflection of life, as a unique reflection of the truths that we see around us. We spoke of literature as excellent content expressed in an excellent manner, something of lasting artistic value, beauty, merit, something which gives us pleasure, and something to which we return again and again with every generation. And we also saw that we need not necessarily agree with any one definition of literature. These are all various aspects of literature. And the beauty of literature lies in its ability to portray the various dimensions, the complexities, the immense possibilities, the diversity of human beings and nature and life and the universe itself. And hope you remember one of our favorite definitions, that all that is literature communicates power, speaks of power. And we also tried to compare two pieces, one a prose piece and another a poem, in order to find out uh, how we can identify a really good piece of literature. Well, today we are going to look at something new, that is literary qualities. When we speak of literariness, or when we look at a work written, or in many cases oral also. Let's remember that oral literature has a longer history than written literature, but unfortunately most of it is lost because it has not been written down. But whatever it may be, when we look at a text, it may be a poem, it may be a play, it may be a story, it may be a novel, an autobiography, a biography, a diary, a piece of travel writing, whatever. And we decide that this is good literature and we try to call it literary. What are the qualities? Now, I have a list of qualities here before you on screen. The list is by no means exhaustive, meaning to say that you can all add your own inputs to this list. But what we have tried to put together here are certain essential qualities of a work of literature. The first in the list is imaginative. So definitely, if you recall our earlier definitions, literature is a reflection of reality of the universe, but it's a unique reflection. It's an imaginative reflection. So the manner in which literature looks at the world is very, very imaginative, unique, and creative. And that is where the appeal of literature lies. The writer has eyes to see what most of us have missed out, or perhaps what we have seen but we have not looked at in a particular manner. So that is the quality of imagination. For example, one of the best examples I can give you perhaps is J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. How much of imagination has gone into the work? She has created an entire parallel universe of magic. So we have all heard of magic. Some of us believe, some of us do not believe. We all have come across the locations and the characters and the incidents she mentions in her book. But Rowling takes it to a different level altogether. She looks at ordinary things with extraordinary eyes. So, something as ordinary as a railway station is filled with magical qualities, and it becomes a doorway for people to enter and exit the world of magic. Coming to the second quality, that is being intellectual or intellectuality. Literature is not simply creating a world of fantasy or imagination, though that is a very important part of literature, but it is also something that provokes thought, that is highly intellectual, in the sense that it gives you the tools to critically analyze the information and the knowledge that you are being bombarded with. uh, it gives you wings to think on your own, to take decisions on your own. And also, the power of literature lies in the different interpretations it yields every time you think of it. So, maybe if you can look, if you have heard of the metaphysical poets, a group of poets writing in the 16th and 17th centuries. When you read their poems, they are highly intellectual in nature. You think a lot over the meaning of the images that they suggest, and these give you lots of new ideas. So definitely, or perhaps let's take the case of folk literature, very simple stories passed on from generation to generation, fables, stories with a moral. On the surface, these seem very simple, but if you look at them deeply, all of them carry uh, the rich wisdom of life, the rich experience of generations, which has been crystallized into the form of a story. So that is where the intellectual element comes in. Then you look at beauty. Definitely, we all agreed, and when we looked at the various definitions of literature, most of them were speaking of this element of beauty. Nabokov compared literature with butterflies. So again, definitions of beauty differ from person to person. Beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. What may be beautiful to you may not be beautiful to me, and what may be beautiful to me, you may find it not very appealing. However, there is a universal sense. There are certain minimum agreed standards or conventions. Again, I'm very wary of using the word standards or conventions still. Uh, there is something on which most of us agree, and we call it beautiful. Now, beautiful does not mean just externally attractive or pleasing. For instance, a tragedy might be a beautiful piece of work, though it evokes a lot of sadness in you. The beauty lies in the way the human emotions are evoked or the experiences are reflected, and the way the experience is conveyed to you, or the way you are transported into a different world, or the way that literature consoles and comforts you in difficult times, or when it gives you guidance when you are in a dilemma. All these are elements of beauty. However, one must remember that the beauty of literature lies from the perfect arrangement of its different components. So there is a sense of proportion, there is a sense of wholeness, nothing seems missing. When you look at a really good story, you don't find anything amiss. Your attention is captured right until the end. The characters, the theme, the way in which incidents are arranged, the images used, everything gels together perfectly, and that is how the element of beauty is created. You must have seen historical monuments built centuries ago, and when you visit these places, why do you find them beautiful? It's a sense of symmetry, the sense of proportion, the sense of how things are arranged together. Pleasing, very closely related to the element of beauty, is that of pleasure. And again, when I say that literature gives you joy or pleasure, does not mean that we are only referring to comedies or happy stories or something which evokes laughter. The pleasure here is also something of a deep kind. It is a kind of satisfaction, a sense of fulfillment, a sense of perhaps emotional release, a sense of spiritual upliftment that you get when you read a really good piece of literature. For instance, if you are reading an inspirational or motivational book like Rhonda Byrne's The Secret, you get a different kind of pleasure out of it. Then historical literature definitely is historical, because when you are reflecting the world and the society around you, literature is takes the form of writing of history. And in many ways, friends, literature can be much more effective than history, because history writing has its limitations and the history writer is often controlled by the powerful. And often it's only the rich and the famous and the powerful who get into the pages of history. But literature has that ability to reflect the people at the margins, the people who are not so famous, the people who are not rich, the people whose contributions are not known. So all this can be captured very effectively by literature. But let me tell you, warn you, we cannot equate literature with history, because as we saw earlier, though literature reflects truth, it reflects truth in its own unique way. Speciality of language. This is a very important literary quality, and this has again been stressed in the various definitions that we saw earlier, that the language of literature is definitely extraordinary. It's different from the ordinary speech and writing of day-to-day life. Does not necessarily mean that it should be poetical, though most of us would prefer poetical language. Even prose, when you read a biography or autobiography, for instance, take Jawaharlal Nehru's Discovery of India, it is all prose, or the writings of Dr. Radhakrishnan, or when you read the essays of Emerson, these are all prose works, but then the language stands out. The way words and phrases are put together has got an appeal, a beauty, and you remember them. These things come to your mind again and again, just as you can never forget the memorable dialogues in the plays of Shakespeare. So the language is definitely different. It is charged with meaning. It brings a different, image to the mind altogether. And then we come to universal values. Definitely, literature contains universal values, and that's the reason why it survives universally from generation to generation. It's not bound by boundaries of time and space and nation and country and race and religion. Literature transcends, it goes beyond all these. Now, again, just like beauty or pleasure, values is a tricky term, because each individual carries a different set of values. Each culture has a different set of values. Each nation has a different set of values. Values keep changing over time. But then there are certain universal aspects which, as I said, most of us would agree on, or most of us would empathize and identify with it. If you read Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, most of us would empathize with that strong, passionate love, which is, selfless, self-sacrificing. Or if you read Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet, you empathize, most of us, with the dilemma of whether to act in a particular situation or to remain passive, to be or not to be, the universal human dilemma. Or if you read the plays of the genius Kalidasa, or if you look at any of the works by our great writers, you have this universal element, which appeal to your innermost feelings and emotions as a human being, which evoke maybe your compassion or sympathy, and which you feel is very close to what you have seen or experienced around you. So these values are universal. Like, despite all the difficulties and troubles and trials, it is good which wins a victory over evil, and the victory won by good is lasting. So that's the message of all our scriptures, right from the Ramayana to the Mahabharata to the Quran to the Bible. So these are universal values which, bind us all together. And then right at the end of the list, I have put the word myths. Now, what do I mean by myths? When we speak of literature, there are a lot of myths associated with it. For instance, if I'm teaching you literature, or if you're studying literature, at least in India, people assume that we are speaking of English literature, or the literature produced of, by, and for a country called England or Great Britain. Well, my dear friends, nothing could be farther from the truth, because literature is universal. And that's why I call these classes literatures in English. So there's no question of giving priority to the language and literature of a particular nation. All of them are equally important, and all of them are equally great, the known and the unknown. And so today, when we speak of literature, let us remember the rich literature produced in each of our native languages and in all the languages of the world. And at the same time, ideas about literariness or the quality of being literary are constantly evolving. As I said, all of you can add your own points to this particular list. What is considered as literature today may not be considered as literature tomorrow, and what was considered as literature yesterday may not be considered as literature today. So, all these ideas that we have in our mind keep on changing, because often, unfortunately, like most other disciplines, literature has also been dominated by people in positions of wealth and fame and power who tried to manipulate canon formation to their own ends. So, literature coming from a particular country or from a particular culture was highlighted, was translated more, was given more publicity, and overshadowed other cultures, languages, and literatures. This has been a very unfortunate state of affairs, especially as a result of colonialism. But however, things have changed and things are changing, and let's hope things will change. And it's up to us to remember that literature is universal, and ideas about what is literary and what is not literary should be debated and discussed with an open mind. We cannot have a strict set of criteria, because finally it depends on each and every reader as to what he or she considers as literary or non-literary. Though we can all have broad standards, broad principles, though that is important, we should also learn to balance with individual and personal preferences. So these are the qualities which make a work literary. Now moving on, this is a short module and we will end with an exercise on how to identify literary qualities, or what are the literary qualities we can identify in a really good piece of literature. Well, here I have a prose piece for you. It reads, "Love is a very powerful emotion. It is a basic human need. Love pervades the very consciousness and existence of human beings. Love can be a source of extraordinary courage and hope. Lovers claim that they are never really separated from each other, though physically they may be far apart." So, a series of short and powerful sentences trying to reflect one of the great truths of the universe, the power of love, the need for love, and how love is an essential part of being human, and how love does not depend on time or space. Well, if you have finished reading this, we'll move on to the next slide I have for you. And here I have "I Carry Your Heart with Me" by E. E. Cummings, one of our, uh, uh, you know, very influential poets. And Cummings writes, "I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I am never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are my world, my true. And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the root and the bud of the bud and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart, I carry it in my heart." Now, dear friends, let's look at the literary qualities in these two pieces. If you look at the first piece, you will agree with me that it's highly intellectual. It definitely makes you to think about this wonderful, or you may call it complex, or you may call it interesting, whatever it may be, about this emotion called love. Um, it is emphatic. It is definitely historical in a sense, because it reflects the experiences of so many, of millions of people across the world. And it gives you also a kind of pleasure, in the sense that you can take it as a consolation, you can take it as a kind of inspirational or motivational reading. You can interpret it in so many different ways. You can all empathize and identify with it. And definitely it's speaking of something universal. So these are the literary qualities we can identify in this prose piece. Now coming to the poem, by now most of you would have noticed that the content of the prose piece and the content of the poem are mostly similar in nature. But then you can see the vast difference in presentation. Cummings' poem hardly looks like a poem. The language reads like prose. The arrangement, you cannot see any rhyming words there. There are run-on lines and the meaning is carried over from one line to another. Some of you may say that the poet has been very careless with punctuation and capitalization as well. But then that is his unique way of presenting things. And let us now look at the literary qualities here one by one. The first quality that we came across was imagination. Is it imaginative? Definitely it is. Because nowhere does he say, I love you, or that my love for you is great, or that I cannot live without this love. He makes a very simple statement: I carry your heart with me, I carry it in my heart. A very imaginative, unique, creative, beautiful expression. And he goes on saying, I'm never without it, I carry it wherever I go, and you and I are not different, we are one. Whatever I do is your doing. And then he goes on to equate his lover with his fate, with his world, with the sun, the moon, the root, the bud, the sky. And he says, you are the tree of life for me. And there's no end to how high this tree can grow. And in fact, our love is what keeps the universe going. And he says, love is a wonder that keeps the stars moving in their orbits, that prevents us from descending into utter chaos. And he ends with the same memorable line: I carry your heart, I carry it in my heart. Simple, sincere evocation of emotion, but done in a very imaginative way. Intellectuality, definitely a lot of intellectuality. We are running short of time, but each of these lines can be interpreted and analyzed in a number of different ways. Beauty, definitely there is beauty. The beauty lies in the simplicity and the sincerity of the emotion, because anybody can understand this poem. A youngster can identify with it, and an older person may read it in a more mature way. It is pleasing, definitely, even without rhyming words, even without any spectacular images. The images are all drawn from a real life, but the pleasure lies in the fact that he is able to bring those objects into a harmony, and we can all identify or empathize with these images. The language is special. It may not be the language that we traditionally associate with poetry, the kind of high flown language. The words are very, very simple. However, there is a way in which they stand out. Even the punctuation, the capitalization, the way the lines run from one to the other, the use of brackets in order to emphasize ideas which are important. All these things, you know, add a lot of value. The language definitely stands out. Universality is definitely there, because this is something which every lover will identify. So, my dear friends, just to conclude, there are literary qualities in this prose piece and there are literary qualities in this poem. But most of you will agree that E. Cummings is able to really embed his creation with a lot of literary qualities. And this is a poem to which you will go back again and again, something which will stay in your mind longer and have more of an impact compared to the first prose piece. So I hope with this brief exercise you have understood how you look at the literary qualities in a text or in a work of art, a work of literature. Well, with this, we'll end our module, that is an introduction to literature, part 2. As I've mentioned earlier, I do look forward to your queries and your feedback, and I hope you remember the literary qualities, and whenever you come across a work of art or literature, you try to identify those qualities, those aspects we have spoken about, and carry this learning with you to our next class. And till we meet again, have a great time. Keep smiling. Stay safe. Thank you very much. Goodbye.